A group of tech CEOs tabled their government-commissioned report today, and they've concluded that this country's tech sector is lagging behind its global counterparts. And they say Canada has to act now, not only to catch up, but to outpace other countries and become a, quote, digital leader. So how can that happen? Joining me now from Toronto is Shopify CEO Toby Lutke. Hi, Mr. Lutke. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So I want to ask you, of course, about this report, which essentially is an urgent call to action for Canada to prepare for the future and take the steps to become sort of a world leader in digital industries. I'm hoping that you can explain to Canadians why the report takes that position, that it is so urgent, and what's at stake if nothing changes.
Yeah, the main message here is like we've all seen change accelerate over the last couple of years. People already 54% of Canadians think that the pace of change is like faster than they would like, but in reality things are going to only speed up. The economy is going to shift significantly. Automation is going to take a massive toll on the economy, and we have been asked, we as industry have been asked by the government to help the government to make sense of it all and sort of which direction things are going to lead. And so here's the good news. Canada is doing really well making startups, and it's a very, very technological advanced country. Canada is significantly more innovative than anyone, I think, in Canada really understands, which is actually an incredible takeaway for me from this one-year journey of talking to almost everyone. And we put together a series of recommendations which are all tweaks to the system, not massive shifts, although they are ambitious, which would make it so that in 10 years from now, not just would Canada participate in this sort of economical change that's happening, but rather lead it. We sort of, one thing we gave people to think about is what we want to do is when someone takes a plane from anywhere in the world to Canada, we want this to not just feel like transportation, but actually feel like a time machine. To arrive in a country which is very confident in its digital adoption, where technology plays a role every day, and people come to rely on technology to a degree that right now we can't even fully imagine yet.
Is there a country or a jurisdiction in the world that is already on pace to do that?
I think Canada has probably as good a position as anyone to do it. We have, when we talk about the economy, one of the problems we have is we have an incredible startup community. There's unbelievable things going on really in new company creation. But one thing that doesn't happen is around the $10 million revenue to $100 million revenue basis for new company creation. That's when a lot of Canadian companies, unfortunately, currently sell their companies to specifically the United States. And we've identified several recommendations and ways of how to change this. If we just thread that needle, I think, and can stop this kind of problem from occurring, I think then Canada is in a good position as anyone.
I think the problem you're identifying or the proposal is around scaling up in the report.
Yes,
and the idea that the report sets a target, I guess, of doubling the number of large Canadian digital companies earning $1 billion or more in annual revenue by 2025 from 13 to 26. So in layman's terms, does that mean direct government help or policy more towards scaling up the bigger companies versus helping the startups?
So it doesn't. What we wanted to avoid is that the government plays a role in picking winners, because I think all governments in the world, frankly, prove that they are not excellent at doing that. What we recommended instead is there's already a lot of government programs, but first of all, a lot of them run out at a certain point. Like if you hire your 25th person, a lot of government programs go away, which sort of incentivizes for staying small. There are about 40,000 Canadian tech companies, but 98% are micro-size. Only 85% of them have more than 10 employees. And so what we need to create like a really economic base, which can be the foundation of an economy in Canada in the future, is we need enough large success stories to become anchor companies in various places, right? Like we know what BlackBerry did for Waterloo region, like Shopify is across Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Waterloo as well. And it's very, very important to have companies like that in the communities. So we want to have essentially an automated way how CRA says, you guys are growing more than 40% year over year, which is incredibly fast. If that happens, here's a new thing called a hypergrowth passport, which makes you eligible to all sorts of government programs at a very accelerated rate. Because the interesting thing is, having been part of one of those companies, is that at this level, if you grow that fast, you're not doing anything other than developing your market, developing your product. And these companies end up being like these freight trains, which really cannot take advantage of a lot of maybe programs which otherwise might be available because they are so focused. And helping them out and pushing from behind is the one thing which Canada doesn't do and a lot of other countries do. And getting them through this sort of accelerated phase of being a private company on their way to become a public company, at which point the value generation of these companies becomes a lot more evenly distributed through the mechanics of the stock market and so on. Helping with that is something that just isn't happening right now, and we can change.
So two things on that. I think there's obviously, and you brought it up when you said the government, you don't want the government in the business of picking winners or losers, but there are a lot of people who will sort of hear or view this as more government intervention and question whether that's necessarily the best thing. And then the other point or question I have for you is, what do you say to people who might say that sounds a lot like helping the rich become richer rather than helping the small guys get started?
Yeah, no, and those are that is the right conversation we should have. Now, what we are saying is, again, all the programs that have been developed with a sort of prevalent Canadian wonderful culture norm of let's put our arms around everyone, and we value on universal healthcare and all these kind of things. And this is actually the best thing about Canada, and Canada should never lose. But we've already developed a lot of systems based on these values. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is exactly how we did sports until recently. And then in the run-up to the Vancouver Olympics, one thing we also decided is, on top of all that, let's create a program called Own the Podium, which means let's reorient from settling for bronze towards let's go for gold. And so on top of this, the Own the Podium program went. The people who had a shot at getting gold medals got extra support, and this is why Canada had the most successful Olympics. And all we are saying is, that already worked really well for Canada. Let's also do this in business, because frankly, like every other country in the world does that, and not having this in Canada causes some competitive problems. Mm-hmm. And the benefit to the greater economy of having Canadian-owned anchor companies is so enormous that this should actually be something that everyone can cheer for.